It's been a few years since the Rodecaster Pro was first released, and recently a wild challenger has zoomed onto the scene in the form of the Zoom P8, which retails for $100 less, has 2 more XLR inputs, and is built for portability. But does the P8 have what it takes to outmaster the Rodecaster for an up-and-coming podcaster? Today, we have the ultimate all-in-one podcast studio showdown. And the absolute winner is, honestly, either one of them, because they're both pretty great. I prefer the Rodecaster, but you can't go wrong either way. They're really good. Thanks for watching. And I'll acknowledge right away that I am biased towards the Rodecaster, but I'm going to do everything that I can to set that bias aside as we dive into the Zoom P8. There's a few things about this that I'm really excited about. First and foremost, though, this video is not sponsored, but Sweetwater Sound did send me over this P8 specifically so that I could do a review and comparison video because I didn't have the budget to get one on my own, and I really don't need one because I have the Rodecaster. So since I don't need it, Sweetwater also said that once I was done with the video, I could just give this away. So stay tuned to the end of this video for instructions on how you can enter to win this exact one that's sitting right here. Sweetwater was also sweet enough to send out an SM7B for me, and this is mine. I'm not giving it away. I've actually never owned my own SM7B before. Anytime you've ever seen me with one, I've always been borrowing them. So it's really great to have one of my own, especially because one of the most common questions I get with any comparisons or reviews is how does it work with the SM7B? And there are a few things specifically with the P8 that I'm really excited to test with the SM7B. We're going to talk about that in just a second. So right now, as you can probably see, I'm recording audio into the Rodecaster through the PodMic, and I've got another PodMic set here so we can open up the P8 and see how great the P8 might be. I can't wait. Let's see. So in the box for the P8, let's see everything that you get. We've got our instruction manuals. We've got power adapter. And we've got the P8 itself. And that seems like everything. Ow. All right, and the P8 itself, here we go. Significantly smaller than the Rodecaster and significantly lighter as well. Over the years, I've owned many Zoom products, a lot of little recorders like this, the H4n. Through my teaching career, I think I've ordered over 100 different Zoom products, and there's one common thread that runs through them all, which is that the audio quality is always outstanding. I've never used a Zoom product where the audio quality wasn't great, but the build quality pretty much always leaves something to be desired. Certain products like the H5 and the H6 are pretty darn well built, but others like this H4n or even the H1 or some of the older like Q2s and Q3s, they're really plasticky and they're really not super durable. And I've noticed they tend to sort of just start falling apart even with regular use. This kind of has that same plasticky feel. It's definitely not as solid feeling as the Rodecaster, but it's not bad. The other thing right away that you might notice is that a lot of the buttons on here, basically everything except for the sound pads, which are nice and soft, all of the buttons are very clicky. And what I'm curious about is when we're recording with this, how are those clicks going to register? Because on the Rodecaster, everything is very soft. When you press a button or you tap on the display, it doesn't get picked up in any of the recording. It can't be really heard in the room. Everything is very, very soft. These are much more clicky. Just a small thing. And as mentioned before, we do have 6 XLR inputs, each one with phantom power. There's a 9-key sound pad. The Rodecaster Pro only has 8 keys on its sound pad, although they are bigger. And the Rodecaster Pro does have libraries built in, so even though there are only 8 physical keys, you can switch between multiple different libraries and load in tons of different sounds. Unlike the Rodecaster, the P8's inputs and outputs are mostly all on the top. There's a few on the back, including the power, the USB-C slot, and the SD card slot, which it does use a full-size SD card instead of the micro SD card that the Rodecaster uses. That's really nice. I'm happy to see a full-size SD card in here. Up top, we also have a 3.5 millimeter input, which also has this other little connector for a Bluetooth antenna you can buy separately and attach right here. The Rodecaster Pro, of course, already has Bluetooth built in, so if you want to connect your phone via Bluetooth or another device, you can just do that directly without any additional purchases. That could be one of the reasons why the P8 why the P8 has a lower retail price than the Rodecaster Pro. You've got your left and right monitor outputs on the top, and then you've got 6 headphone outputs. They're all 3.5 millimeter, along with your basic recording controls, the record button, play, pause, marker, and stop. The Rodecaster Pro has 4 XLR channels, so it has 4 1/4-inch headphone outputs on the back and 1 3.5 millimeter headphone output on the front. Each of the channel sliders has a mute button and an on-air button, which function essentially the same as the mute and solo buttons on the Rodecaster Pro. Now, right away, one thing I can say that I really love about this without even turning it on is the fact that all the channels are already color-coded. So channel 4 is green, the input is green up here, the headphone jack is green, and the headphone monitor level is green as well. So as the person who's operating this during a podcast, it's going to be really easy to remember who's using which microphone, who you need to adjust, and it just kind of keeps things organized just straight out of the box. I love that. You do have the sliders down here for all 6 XLR channels, plus the smartphone 3.5 millimeter channel, plus the sound pads themselves. The sliders feel pretty good. Actually, they feel pretty similar to the Rodecaster. If anything, I would say these feel a little bit better. They're kind of like a little smoother than the Rodecaster. Neither of like the most amazing sliders I've ever used, but the sliders on the P8 are so tiny. The Rodecaster has sort of more full-size sliders. These ones are just so little. If they were any shorter, they would just be on-off switches. So in terms of dialing in a little more nuanced sound, you don't have as many options here with the P8. So those are the physical specifications. Let's turn it on, try it out, and see how it actually performs. So now I've had a little bit of time to play around with the P8 and get to understand it a bit. And overall, it is great. So let's walk through some of the features. Let's do a few tests, and let's also point out some things that you might want to be aware of that aren't so great. Right now, I'm still going through the Rodecaster Pro, and let's switch over to the P8 now. This PodMic is the Rodecaster. This one is the P8. And this audio right here is from the P8. Ain't it great? I just can't stop making that joke. So I'm running through channel 1, and I have to say right away that the headphone preamps on the P8 are way better than the Rodecaster. If you know me, you know that one of my gripes with the Rodecaster is that the headphone preamps just aren't that great. They tend to have a lot of noise and a lot of hiss, and I know it's not just my Rodecaster that does it because I've talked to many other people that have that same problem. That is not an issue on the P8. It seems much more accurate in terms of what you're hearing in the headphones is what's coming through on the actual recording. The touchscreen interface is incredibly responsive. It's just like a smartphone, basically the same as the Rodecaster Pro. They have great interfaces. The design of the UI on the Zoom is a little bit clunky, but everything is pretty easy to understand. For your 6 XLR channels, if you tap on the microphone input, you get several other options, including the ability to adjust the level, the gain level of the microphone. You can add in bass, you can add a compressor and a de-esser. So if I turn those off, now this is a totally dry mix, or I can add in some bass, lean towards the treble, lean towards the bass, or just leave things neutral. Or I can add in that compressor and that de-esser, which it just says make your voice sound professional. Sure. I actually do kind of like the way that that sounds. And then you can add in a limiter on and off over here and a low cut on and off over here. So you've got some pretty nice built-in equalization. It's not as full-featured as the Rodecaster Pro, but it is really accessible in a nice way that just like works on the fly. Now, one thing that's very frustrating here, the Rodecaster, when you change the gain of a channel, you see the actual number. On the P8, it's just sort of a min-max, and you're just sort of guessing. And that's frustrating to me because the gain, the amount of gain that's in here is one of the, what I think is one of the biggest selling points of the unit. We're going to talk about that in a second. Going back to the home screen, you can see right here I'm running on power, so if I open that up, and this menu will let you set what kind of power you're using, especially important if you're using batteries because you better believe that this will let you select the type of battery you're using and also the display brightness, which can help save some battery power. The SD card option is where you can go. I can't use it right now because I'm recording through here, but it's where you could go and format the card, back up the card, transfer some files. All that is done in there. When you enable USB file transfer, you'll see the icons come up on the display screen, and then on your computer, the P8 will just show up as a removable hard drive. If you open it up, you will see P8 multi-track and P8 settings, along with stereo versions of your files. So up here, I have 2 stereo versions of the files I've recorded so far this morning. And then down here, we have multi-track, which includes all 6 of the XLR inputs, plus the phone, plus the sound pad for each of those recordings. So you always have the ability to get multi-track in addition to your stereo tracks. And then you can just drag the files to your computer when you're ready to edit them. And then you've got your date and your time settings. You can also change the language of the system right in there. The smartphone channel has treble and bass, boost and cut. And the sound pads are fun. When you turn it on, they get really colorful. They're soft, just like the Rodecaster. Whoops. I didn't mean to do that. The sound pads are pretty fun. If you tap on one, you can then adjust the volume of that pad. You can change the play mode. Do you want one shot, where it's just the whole thing? You can have a pause mode, which I actually really like. That means you can start it, pause it, and then continue it. You've got a loop where every time you press it, it will start or stop it from the beginning. And then you've got hold, where it will only play while you're holding it. And you've got that for all 9 of the pads. Once you go into a pad, also, that's when you can tap on the file that you're using. It comes preloaded with basically all the standards you would hope for. And if you want to load in more options, you just put them on your SD card and then they will show up here and you can load them in. A good reminder though for either of these units is that the sound pads don't have to just be for like cheesy sound effects. You can use them for interviews, you can use them for longer clips. They can be really, really useful and really, really dynamic. And part of what makes both of these so useful is that if you utilize the sound pads in a great way, you can do the all-in-one podcast production here. I actually did a whole video all about my Rodecaster Pro workflow, which involves 0 editing most of the time. The entire show is produced start to finish, almost in real time, right in here, and then uploaded, ready to go. And you can do that with either one of these. That's where it's like, it really is a whole studio in one little compact unit. I love that. One thing you might notice, since the headphone outputs are on the top, the headphone wires can drape across the top of it. I've only got the one, but you can only imagine if you have 6 people plugged in here, it's gonna get a little messy, so cable management's gonna be important. I think I definitely prefer these being on the rear of the unit, like with the Rodecaster, so that way nothing is interfering with the top of the device. Now, as you might know, on the Rodecaster Pro, we've got a USB channel, so when it's connected to the computer, it's sending signals out to the computer, but can also bring in audio from the computer. The P8 does the exact same thing, but instead of having a dedicated USB channel, it's actually channel 6. So channel 6 has a little switch which will go from microphone to phantom power to USB input. And then when you do that, on the display, you'll actually notice channel 6 switching to USB, and if you press that, it's going to give you a few different options, not just for adjusting your USB input, but also for adding in USB mix minus. So that's very important if you want to use this for like a Zoom meeting or something like that where voices are coming in and you don't want them to go back out. Making sure you have USB mix minus turned on. Very, very important. And now I want to talk about what for me is the potentially most exciting part of the P8, and that is its gain level. So built in to this unit on each of the XLR channels is 70 decibels of gain. Just for reference, the Rodecaster Pro has 55 decibels of gain on each of its channels, which is why I often do end up using a cloud lifter, and a cloud lifter adds 25 decibels of gain. And the reason you don't want to just always max out your gain is because it's like increasing the ISO on your camera. When you increase your camera's ISO, you start getting noise and artifacts. Same thing goes with audio. When you increase the gain too much, you start getting in some of that hiss and distortion and just ugly sounding stuff that you can't get rid of. So the more gain you have means the more room you have to get not only a loud enough signal, but a clean signal. So this has 70 decibels of gain. The Rodecaster has 55. The Rodecaster plus the Cloud Lifter has 80 decibels of gain, so 10 more than the P8. And of course, you could use a Cloud Lifter. And when I say Cloud Lifter, that's just what I'm using, but I'm referring to a Fathead, a Dynamite, any kind of signal booster. But here's why I'm so interested in it. One, I'm using the PodMic right now, which I do normally use a cloud lifter with on the Rodecaster, although you can get by without it. However, my gain level, as you can see, is only in the middle. If I turn the gain all the way up, oh my gosh, wow. I have the volume slider at about halfway, and I am really far away from the microphone, and I'm kind of maxing things out. I can turn the slider down. If I turn the slider all the way up, you can hear me barely whispering. There's a lot of gain to be gained from this P8. Here's why that matters. Remember when I talked about the SM7B, super popular microphone, but also a super quiet microphone? Typically, you always need a cloud lifter with an SM7B. If you're able to use the SM7B with the P8 and no cloud lifter with plenty of headroom in your volume, I think that's a huge selling point for anyone who wants to use this microphone or a similar microphone with their podcasting setup. So we're going to connect the SM7B to channel 2. And let's see, I'm going to switch over to the SM7B right now. Here we go. This is the SM7B just on default settings. If I stop talking, you can definitely hear a little hiss in the background. But let's see if we can turn up the gain so I can turn down the volume slider and maybe reduce some of that noise. If I boost the gain all the way up, it's not quite as strong as it was on the PodMic, but if I turn it down just a little bit, now, wow, okay. So my volume slider, bless you. My volume slider is just under halfway on the P8. My gain setting is just at about 75%. Again, I wish there were actual numbers there, and I am only a couple of inches away from the SM7B, just where I would normally be when talking or recording with it. You can kind of see that over here, how far away I am from that microphone. And I have more than enough gain to work with. Even if I get a little bit further away from the microphone, I start leaning back in my chair, I can talk. So you don't need a cloud lifter or a signal booster with the P8. I feel like this is a bigger deal than I've heard. This is the part that's been most exciting to me. And I know that the P4, the 4-track version of this, which is a little smaller and a little less expensive, also has the same, 70 decibels of gain. This is huge because if you're somebody who's had to invest in a cloud lifter, you know that it can kind of be a hassle. It works great, but you're already spending like $400 on a microphone, and then you need to spend another $100 or $200 on a signal booster for that microphone. Or if you have 4 of them, or in this case 6 of them, and you need to get boosters for all those channels, that's a pretty significant financial investment. And more importantly to me, that's when it starts to negatively affect the practicality of the unit, because you have all these cables and all these different things hanging out all over the place instead of just your compact all-in-one podcasting studio. So by having this much gain built into the unit, this means that the P8 really, really is like everything that you need to produce a podcast. And of course, that's not to say the Rodecaster isn't an all-in-one unit, but I've definitely been maxing out some of the levels and needing to add a cloud lifter and things like that. So the fact you don't have to do that with this, and even a really gain-hungry mic like the SM7B, is a really big deal. Let's take this one step further, though, and look at one of the other killer features, supposed killer features of the P8. Now, as you may or may not know, the P8 can run on AA batteries, which, by the way, can I just say that when it comes to Zoom products, they've been doing this for years and years and years, but when you power them off, it gives you this nice little goodbye message. I love that. I think it's adorable. This takes 4 AA batteries, and you battery believe I got 4 of them right here for the P8. And now, just for reference, when it comes to battery life, the P8 is rated as 2 hours with phantom power off and recording with headphones, 3.5 hours with NIMH batteries, phantom power off, recording with headphones, and 6.5 hours with no phantom power, AA lithium batteries. I've talked about this in some of my other videos, but Rode released this USB power adapter for the Rodecaster Pro a while ago, where it plugs into the power and then you can run the Rodecaster off of a USB power bank. It's great and it works really well. Sometimes I've just taped a power bank to the bottom of the Rodecaster, but the biggest downside to that is it gives you no indication of how much power is left. So you just kind of have to hope that your USB power brick has some kind of battery life indicator on it or power left indicator, because otherwise there's no way to know. Now, as soon as I put in batteries, the screen on the P8 did dim quite a bit, but you can see instead of power in the corner, it now has the battery sign. It's not telling me exactly how much power I have left in terms of minutes or time or anything, or even percentage, but the battery indicator is divided into 3 segments, so at least I can keep an eye on it. And I'm gonna switch back over here with the SM7B specifically because of how much gain is being driven out of here. And I know that this is unnecessary, but I'm gonna flip phantom power on like all of the channels that I'm not using right now, just to sort of see how that works. So right now I am recording with just batteries, nothing else connected right here, using an SM7B with, I wish I had the exact levels, but something like, I would guess somewhere around 60 decibels, 55 to 60 decibels of gain, and plenty of headroom on my slider. And I can do that all on battery power. So that is pretty amazing. So hopefully at this point you can see why I started this video off by saying you can't go wrong either way. I don't think either one of these is inherently better or worse than the other. Each one definitely has features that I wish the other had. The Rodecaster Pro has better build quality, it has better buttons, it has more equalization options. The Rodecaster also has the companion app, which makes it easy for you to bring in sound effects, easy for you to adjust the effects and the equalization on the fly. There's no companion app with the Zoom P8, but the P8 has 70 decibels of gain. It's much easier to run on battery power. It has 2 extra XLR inputs. It does have 1 more physical sound pad, if that's something that matters to you. And it has everything color-coded straight out of the box, which is nice. And it just takes a full-size SD card. Now, a couple downsides to the P8 to be aware of. The first is I'm personally not a fan of all of the inputs being on the top. It's nice to be able to see everything right there, but having these cables run over everything, and this is only with 2 microphones and 1 pair of headphones. Can you imagine with 6 inputs and 6 headphones and possibly even like a 3.5 millimeter thing happening? It just feels like it would get very messy. I like having all the inputs on the back of the device more than on the top. Just a personal preference thing though, not necessarily objectively bad. The fact that it doesn't have built-in Bluetooth may be a pro or a con depending on how much you use that. The Rodecaster Pro, of course, comes with Bluetooth built in automatically. The short sliders on the P8 are kind of hilarious. I mean, they get the job done, but you definitely don't have the nuance and the fine-tuning ability that you have on the Rodecaster Pro or a more traditional mixer. And even though I'm no designer, so I don't mean to be speaking out of my pay grade, but if the XLR plugs are on the back of the unit, you could move the display up and then extend the slider channels. Just a thought, just a thought. Just a thought. Something that only time will tell will be how often Zoom updates the firmware. So the Rodecaster's been out for a few years now, but it's gotten some major firmware overhauls in that time, which have totally changed the functionality. In some cases, it's almost made it like an entirely new device just because of firmware updates. This is still running the 1.0 firmware, so it'll be interesting to see how often and how long Zoom updates their firmware and what kind of changes they make, because that can breathe whole new life into a device like this. But the biggest con, in my opinion, is actually the build quality. While it's not bad, if this were just gonna sit on your desk like this and stay here, it'll last a really long time. However, this is where Zoom always makes confusing decisions. This is clearly a device built for portability. It's got a ton of features. You don't need external things like cloud lifters. It can run on AA batteries. I mean, I'm running it on AA batteries right now, but it's still very plasticky and kind of not the highest quality feeling, meaning that if you were to travel with it to use it in remote locations on a regular basis, I could imagine it getting beat up pretty quickly, possibly even, getting damaged pretty easily. Of course, that can depend on how well you're taking care of it, but it just seems like it's not going to take much to dent it, scratch it, chip it, mess something up on it. It just doesn't have that super rugged, durable feel that you would expect something like this to have. And it does have those super clicky buttons, so when you're pressing it, you might hear that in the background of your recordings. Even as lightly as I can press the button, it still does that. So all in all, I'm really impressed. In a way, this sort of feels like when I was in college and I was gonna buy my first brand new car. I needed something that was comfortable and reliable and affordable, and I was trying to choose between a Toyota Corolla and a Honda Civic. And the difference between a 2009 Corolla and Civic is almost non-existent, and I stressed myself out for months over it, when in the end, Either one would have been fine. I went with the Corolla because it came in a cooler shade of blue. Shocking, I know. Both of these are going to let you create incredible work. Both of them have great features. It just depends if there's specific things you want from one or the other. The Rodecaster definitely has an edge in terms of build quality. The P8 has an edge in terms of 2 more XLR inputs, plus all of that built-in gain. For me, that's the biggest selling point of this, is all that built-in gain and the native ability to run on batteries without any other adapters or anything like that. It's pretty cool too. So again, thank you to Sweetwater Sound for sending out this SM7B for me, but more importantly, thank you to Sweetwater for sending this P8. And now that I have checked it out, I think it's pretty awesome, but I'm sticking with my Rodecaster Pro because I love it. I love the Rodecaster. I don't need this. So let's give this to somebody who does. All that you need to do in order to win this giveaway is click the link in the description to this video. It's going to be open for 48 hours after this video goes live. So if you're watching this after that, the giveaway has ended. Congratulations to the winner. I can't wait to hear all your podcasts that you make with the P8. The link in the description will take you to the entry form. I am in the middle of creating my very first course, which is all about launching your own podcast. So to enter the giveaway, you do need to sign up for my mailing list, which I promise I don't spam people. I hardly ever even send out messages, but I want to give this to somebody who I think is actually going to use it and get some joy out of it and use it to create podcasts and things. And so my podcast course mailing list seems like a natural fit for that. Unfortunately, since I am the one shipping it, you're getting this exact unit that I've used in this video, so I'm taking as good of care of it as I can. Since I have to be the one to ship it, I do need to limit entries to the United States only. I wish I could include everyone all around the world, but for now, for the sake of practicality and shipping costs, it does need to stick with US only. And then the winner will just be notified via email. And I am so excited to see who wins this, who gets it, and what you do with it. And of course, this is not an official YouTube contest, and Sweetwater Sound is not involved with this contest, so please don't contact them about it. They just sent me this and said I could give it away if I wanted to, and I do. And I hope that I can give it away to you. So check that out. If you want to know more, though, about the Rodecaster Pro, one of my favorite tools that I've ever purchased, here are a couple of videos that I think would be perfect to check out next.